Boom, I'm in the room. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Everyday Conversations regarding mental health. Now, you're here because there's nothing on the telly. And I'm coming to you live from the old Heale Manor. And I'm your host, Lord Heale. So, this evening, I've got a fantastic guest coming on. Now, you know this is all about mental health, mental well-being, and trying to take the stigma out of it to let people know that it's okay not to be okay and all the rest of that. Well, this evening I've got the CEO of Veterans Outreach Support, and he's going to tell us all about what they do down in this area. So without too much further ado, let's drag him in. So, welcome. Ian, good evening, welcome.
Hello, good evening, Tim. Thanks for having me. And I can honestly say I've never had such a warm and rapturous welcome as that on anything I've ever done. So congratulations there.
Well, we try and make people special. So Ian, can you tell us a little bit about your background and where you've come from and how you got involved with VOS, which is the Veterans Outreach Support? So the floor's yours.
Okay, well, I'm an ex-Matlow. I joined the Navy way back in 1977. I know I don't look old enough, but I did, and I spent 30 years in the Navy. Roughly about half of it as a rating and half of it as an officer. I left in 2007, which was the 25th anniversary of the Falklands, which was special for me to stay in until then because I'm also a Falklands veteran, obviously a very young man at the time of that, only 21. So now you can work out how old I am. And in 2007, I left my last job in Ministry of Defence, went off to join the Serious Organised Crime Agency for 4 years. So if you've got any previous convictions, perhaps now's the time to keep quiet about those, Tim. And then I went back into the world that I came from, basically, which was working in the intelligence world, but did it in the commercial sector, helping ships move around the world and keeping them out of the way of Somali pirates and the like for a good number of years before I did a bit of consultancy. But about 5 years ago, or just over 5 years ago, and I live in Portsmouth, my wife said to me, "Have you ever heard of Veterans Outreach Support?" And I said, "No, I haven't." And she said, "Well, they're in Portsmouth and they're looking for a new chief exec." Now, clearly, as I said, the Falklands meant a lot to me. I'm one of the lucky ones, and that's the kind of context as to why I went into the charity sector, because I served, I'd transitioned, I'd been fortunate in all that the services had given me. I live in Portsmouth, and there was this charity that was actually started because of its connections to the Falklands, and so it was an opportunity for me to go and see if I could give something back. That was 5 years ago, and I've been there as a chief exec since 2018, October 2018, and we're down there in Queen Street in Portsmouth in the Royal Maritime Club. We operate in various places, but I'm sure we'll get on to that. But that's how I ended up where I am now. A long-term serviceman myself, a veteran, with an opportunity to do something for other veterans. So what's not to like, I guess.
Terrific. So that's the basic background of how you came to become the chief executive of VOS. Now VOS was set up a while back, and I became a member probably about 2 years ago now, thereabouts, when I first heard about it. I didn't quite know what it was all about, and I went along to, I think the first place I went to was the Crofton, for a Sticky's Buns and Banter.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
you heard there was free food on there.
Well, yeah. And the good thing about it, keep it quiet. Don't want everybody to know because they'll all turn up on a particular Thursday of the month. We have bacon and sausage buns.
Yeah. So,
that does attract a large audience. Rest of
Sure.
the time it's just biscuits,
Yeah.
tea and biscuits.
Tea and coffee. Yeah.
But it's a great little group that we get together once a week. We have a little bit of banter. We take the mickey out of the RAF and that. And it's quite surprising the amount of veterans that are in this area. And we did a
Yeah.
piece last year. You came along to the Crofton, and we had a camera team there, and they did a little piece. And I thought it was just going out in the local news. It turned out it went across the local or the national evening news, and the guys come and did a little bit about me and what I do. And off the back of that, I had a phone call from a lad that's up in the Midlands that was struggling, and I put him in
Yeah.
touch with a couple of people. We got him sorted out, but he'd effectively been housebound for 2 years, and was starting to go downhill quite badly. And the guys that we sorted him out have managed to get him on the straight and narrow again. But because he was out of area, Voss is predominantly for the south, along this bit of
Yeah.
south coast from, I guess, Chichester to Southampton. So,
Well, to some
what?
extent, but let me come later on. I'll come on to something else where we have got a bit further reach, but let's do that later. But predominantly
Yeah,
Portsmouth, surrounding areas, Isle of Wight, and basically the Solent region and the South Hampshire really. But
yeah.
it's more about how far people want to travel to come and see us. But if there was somebody in Arbroath that wanted to come and join you having a sausage butty on a Thursday, then they'd be perfectly welcome.
Yeah, don't tell them which Thursday though.
No, right,
So, also you have this monthly drop in,
yeah,
which is really really important for lots of guys and girls.
mhm,
That
yeah,
you manage to have on the first Wednesday of the month, you get in all different agencies to
yeah.
come and support us veterans. So, what agencies do you get in?
Well, we're quite fortunate, as you say. We have a drop in that's on the first Wednesday of the month in Portsmouth, and the third Wednesday of the month in Newport on the Isle of Wight. And we've got about on the books probably about 40 different delivery partners, and they can range from the bigger charities like RBL, Royal British Legion, and SAFA, Help for Heroes, and the like. Some of as this is a mental health podcast, obviously we've got people that come along from. We've got connections with combat stress. We have connections with the statutory services in Op Courage that where the NHS will help with mental health as well. And then there's a whole range of other charities, and everything from people that can help with energy costs right through to Hounds for Heroes, for example, where people need assistance
Mm.
dogs and things like that. Local hospices where they've also got veterans connections for helping veterans out, and all kinds of welfare people. Some associations, you get people like Royal Naval Benevolent Trust come along there, and lots of other. So in that room, in the ballroom, because it's the largest event, is the Portsmouth one. That they are drawn from about 40 different delivery partners, and it's important to say that those delivery partners, whilst they come along once a month to the drop-in and set up their stalls and pull up their pop-up banners and everything else, and they're there to help out people alongside our own staff, be it our welfare staff, our wellbeing staff, and our clinical staff as well, because we have our in-house clinical staff. Whilst that takes place on that drop-in day, we're also open for business all the other days as well, but not weekends normally. Although, having said that, we often have events going on at weekends.
Mm.
So, we do get the concept of the drop in, and a lot of military people listening to this will know what we mean by concepts. And many of you will like a good schematic showing how it all works. Well, the drop in concept, which the whole thing was built around by our four founders back in 2007, which was the 25th anniversary of Falklands War, and I'd like to say a little bit about that in a moment. People can come to us, they can seek our help outside of those drop-in days. It's just that on a drop-in day is when we sort of muster, kind of in my terms as an ex-Navy guy, is almost a kind of all hands on deck. We've got up to 40 delivery partners. We've got about 30 volunteers. We've got about 10 of our VOS staff. And we're all there ready to tackle that to the extent that there are very few things I can think of that if somebody walks through the door, and you don't need an appointment, comes through the door on that day, whether it's a mental health issue you've got, whether it's a legal matter that you want to look into, a welfare issue you want to come and see and just see some of our wellbeing events, or frankly you want to come in for a cup of tea and a custard cream and just have a bit of friendly banter, as you say. Any of those things are possible. But
Yeah.
we've also got access on other days as well. But I'll pause for a second. But would you like to hear a bit about our founders, because they're very special people, and we wouldn't be here today without them.
Yeah, we'll go into that in just a second, but you also
Okay,
get
no,
the a couple of really important agencies like DWP and Veterans
yeah,
UK that are there to help and advise as well at the drop-in. And those are key for helping, particularly if you've got problems with your pensions and stuff like that.
yeah,
Absolutely
indeed, yeah.
brilliant.
And we've
So the
got, as a
four
result,
founders,
sorry, go on. Yeah, I was going to
yeah,
say, as far as the DWP Vets UK are concerned, it prompted by the fact that we had to rely on partners to do this. We also established our own welfare department now. It's very small. It's just one manager and two helpers there, and so we do our own. We can give our own help with everything from somebody who wants to apply for a pension, a war pension, things like that. Personal independent payments, universal credit, so we can help out with those as well. In terms of our four founders, four very special people who were involved in the what was a pilgrimage down to the Falkland Islands on the 25th anniversary, and amongst them there was an eminent Royal Navy psychiatrist called Morgan O'Connell, who was a commander at the time, and it was the first time, I believe, that a psychiatrist had been actually deployed in a military operation. You'd had doctors being deployed before for medical things, but so a psychiatrist went down there. There were a couple of Falklands veterans in the form of two senior eights. A fellow called Joe Erskine was one who was on the survey ships, but they were doing a casualty reception on there, taking the wounded. And there's another fellow called David Watts, and he's an important part of the plot because by 2007 or 2008, when they come back from this pilgrimage, David Watts was by now the general manager of the Royal Maritime Club. So you can see why we ended up there, because he gave the services free. And the fourth person was a very special person, both then and now, and a lady called Anne Townsend. And Anne Townsend and all four of our founders are around today, still take an active interest in VOS. Anne had very sadly lost her son Neil on Mount Longdon, and he was a member of 3 Para on his 18th birthday. And so Anne has been a reminder from the outset of VOS to where we are today of the critical importance of how we need to look after families as well. And Anne herself probably done every job in the charity, probably including my own, over the years, and they all still take an interest. So those four people that set up VOS back in 2008, starting off with one night when they just had a bit of a social and a Skittles night or whatever, maybe 4 people turned up. Well, now we're probably going to have this year around about 1,000 people who have been to our drop-ins. But then by the time you take into account the events you talked about, our wellbeing events, the activities, other types of social events around the bazaars on the island and here, we've probably got something like about 5,000 interventions a year where a veteran or a family member is sat down doing something connected with VOS. And from the days when they did the first thing back in 2008 and about 3 people turned up, I think you'd have to agree that we've moved on a bit.
certainly have. Now, you raised a very important point there. VOS is not just for the service, the ex-service personnel. It's also for also serving members and their families and dependents.
Yeah,
That's the key, because lots of charities, it's just for the service person. It's not, they don't
yeah,
look to help the family side of it, which is the most, for me, is one of the most important factors.
yeah,
Is my wife is now involved with coming along to some of the events and
good.
helping out as well now. So
Yeah,
families are by and far the most important people in our lives. They're the ones that stuck at home when we've been deployed and all the rest of it. They're the ones that have suffered probably more than us.
absolutely.
They might not have the same sort of issues, but they certainly have
Yeah.
seen ours.
Well, when you're deployed, you're busy and getting on with the job, and at
Yeah,
home, people are worrying, aren't they? And we do with families. I mean, we're sort of worth saying that we're limited to what extent. So we certainly are in a position to offer services to close family members like spouses, partners, so husbands and wives, all that kind of stuff. We don't provide direct support to children 18 and under 18, but that's purely for reasons of safeguarding, and it is,
yeah,
any organisation or charity that looks after children has to have very specialist training, specialist
yeah,
people, etc. But of course we do, in a way, because if mum or dad, and either one of them could have been the serving person or the veteran, or the partner. But if we can be in a position to help out mum or dad, then, and that family unit is having the benefit of that, whatever that help may be. So we have done that from the outset. I should also point out that, as well as all the UK Armed Forces that we support, and I would say, broadly speaking, about 50% of our service users are from the Army. And of course, it was a larger service, so maybe that's not a surprise. It might be in Portsmouth a bit, because you think Portsmouth Navy, isn't that where Captain Hornblower came from? Yeah. So we've got an Army about 50%. The naval service of the Royal Navy and the Royal Marines is probably about 40%. I'll have to get the maths right, won't I? About 8% are Royal Air Force, because there aren't too many Air
yeah.
Force people settled in the area, probably more on the Isle of Wight. And then 2%, the smallest cohort, but a very important one, is the Merchant Navy. And we support them too, because I'm sorry to harp on about the Falklands, but it was what prompted the start of the charity. But in the Falklands, for all the Navy ships that I was
Yeah,
on, and others, we had about 110 different merchant Navy ships, tankers, supply ships, ocean-going tugs, uh, repair ships, all
the
kinds of
Atlantic
ships that were
conveyor
down there.
that
Yeah, exactly.
that
Well,
suffered.
and of course, yeah, the Atlantic conveyor that was lost, of course. So all of those, I would say men and women, because there were men and women in the Falklands,
Yeah,
uh, primarily on the merchant navy ships, and probably men at the time. But all those people that went down there, they were all under the same threat. So when our founders set up this organisation, they said, "Well, let's not forget the merchant navy," and they didn't. And we've still got merchant navy coming today. You probably get some coming to share your sausage and bacon butties on the Thursday
yeah.
that the Royal
I
Navy.
think we've got one or two in there actually.
Yeah,
So from the outset, then, how has the charity been funded?
yeah. Well, funding, always the biggest challenge, especially for a chief executive, because funding is like oxygen for a charity. If you haven't got the funding, you haven't got a charity, or
Yeah,
you're very
you
limited in what you
can't
can
do
do for
anything.
children.
Yeah,
And the numbers that I've told you about just there, it's all got to be paid for, including your bacon butties. Although we do get some very kind donations from local entities like, well, I won't mention any names on here, but we do get some donations for the kind of things like that. But when we're putting people on activities, when we're bringing in people for mental health therapies, for example, then we need professional help. So we need to have clinicians, be it therapists, psychiatrists, to help with that. And of course, we need to pay for their services. So our funding hitherto, certainly in the last few years, and since FOSS has been around, and by the way, it's our 15th birthday this year, it's mainly come from the armed forces grant making charities. So the big ones, over the years, like Army Benevolent Fund, RAF Benevolent Fund, Royal Navy, Royal Marines Charity. We also had a lot of funding from Greenwich Hospital and the like. So it's mainly been the big grant funders, and I won't list them all. And if anybody from other places is listening to this now, I'm just sort of giving some examples. But we're very fortunate to have that funding, because there are some up and coming new charities that are making grants out there now. I will do one plug for one, because it is on the up. Each year they're giving more and more money to charities, and that's the Veterans Foundation. Now they have a thing called a Veterans Raffle that helps support charities. Now I'm not plugging the Veterans Raffle, but safe to say that it's a great vehicle. I'm in it, but I haven't won yet, though, by the way. Because all the funds that they're getting from things like that are then getting ploughed back into charities. So it's a great model in many ways. So hitherto, Tim, that has been the case, is that mainly the major grant makers. I think what we'll see in the near future, and this is already happening with some, is that because during COVID, all of these large charities said, well, we can't let the smaller charities fail. We've got to help them out, and we've got to help individuals out. They had to dig deep into the sort of reserves to be able to fund all of this. Yeah. And it's no surprise that in 2023 they're kind of feeling the pinch a bit. So the challenge now is to find other ways of getting funding. What I will say, because it's the kindness of individuals, it's not all about big grant makers. It's about somebody that does a cake sale and raises some money. It's about veterans that that have done things like the Great South Run and got sponsorship. It's about associations. It's about we've had lots of Freemasons that have given us money. We've had organisations like HMS Hermes, who have at their annual reunion have given us a cheque for £500 or something. All these really, really kind donations mean a lot to us. And if you get the little old lady that sent you a couple of pound notes, or a couple of pound notes, I'm showing my age now, a couple of pound coins sellotaped inside of an envelope, that's human kindness, and we do benefit from that. We don't do an awful lot of when we're out and about at various events, especially in the summer. We put up our gazebo, we put up our up our flags and everything else. We're not there deliberately to shake a tin. We're there to spread the word. But you'll be amazed at the kindness of people that come along and help us out. So that's the kind of funding model, really.
That's terrific, and hopefully long may it last. And
indeed.
Because the work that you do is phenomenal. I mean, I've benefited personally from a couple of trips out on the old motor torpedo boat and the 102, the inshore rescue, tearing up the Solent and back. It's the quickest I've ever been to Cowes and back,
knots?
That's for sure.
How fast was it? How fast did it go?
30 knots, I think. We just tipped 30 knots, and that's quite rapid to get to Cowes.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah.
So I benefit from that, but I know there's lots of other events that people have taken part in that you lay on, which is terrific. And you obviously can't do that without some sort of funding.
No,
so that's anybody that's out there that would like to donate to the charity. It will be most gratefully received.
Oh, that's very kind. Think you. Yeah.
And I, for one, will be supporting you and spreading the word as much as I can. And I think what Voss is doing for veterans in this area is terrific.
Tim, could I just make a plug for? I said earlier on that there's there's a kind of a wider picture as well from VOS. I mean,
Yeah.
not just in the Solent area, but it's more about what we do in partnership. As I said to you earlier on, our DNA is all about collaboration. That's why we work with partners. We recognise that we can't do it all by ourselves. So we join forces with others. And the Armed Forces Covenant Fund Trust, who've also been a tremendous supporter of ours and have funded us in various projects and still do so. They've set up a thing called Veterans, Places, Pathways and People. Now, there could be people listening all over the country to this, and this particular programme covers the whole of the UK. There are 7 regions in England, and then you have Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. And in each region, and in our case the South East, a portfolio lead is nominated. And each of the portfolio leads works with other charities or entities. In our case, there are 9 of them in the southeast of England, ranging from way up in sort of Bedfordshire, skirting around the boundaries of London, right across to the Medway. We've got 9 different projects, and for the last 2 years we've been working with these guys, and we've all had they all do very different things, but the common aim has always been the well-being and especially mental health well-being of veterans and their families. So if anybody gets a chance to look at our website, which is www.vosuk.org, that's Victor Oscar Sierra Uniform Kilo.org, then you'll see there. Look up for VPPP, Veterans, Places, Pathways and People, because it's our way of being able to collaborate with people of a wider geographical region, all for the good of veterans. And as I said, we are only one area. So if you're up there in Newcastle or Penrith or Belfast or Cardiff, well, there is an equivalent in your area that's worth looking up.
I'll put that down in the description, so you can have a butcher's edit later.
Yeah.
So, Ian, thank you so much for sharing what you guys at VOS do for the veterans in this area. I'd be lost without it. Really would. Yeah. It's so important that it gives veterans somewhere to go. And it gives a huge amount of support in the local area. And I met loads of new people, loads of new friends through VOS activities. So
that's great.
I personally like to thank you guys for what you've done for us.
You're very welcome, Tim. And I don't know if I'm giving any secrets away, but I know you've also joined our choir. So and we see you on a more regular basis now doing that. And we're going to have a big Christmas carol concert, as you know, coming up. Yeah. But thank you for doing what you do, because I think the subject of your podcast and taking the stigma out of mental health. You said right at the beginning, I heard you say, it's okay not to be okay. Couldn't Absolutely. Agree with you more. And we see people come along to us, and it can be transformational to help them out. They might be lonely or isolated or whatever. They might have mental health problems. They might not have any of those, and they might just need some help in other areas. Or they might just want to come along just for a bit of company. And we can do all of those things. And we're very, very proud to do it, very privileged to do it. And I speak as somebody who's served myself. So it was an honour to serve, and you've got all your uniforms behind you, and I know how proud you feel about that. But you know what? It's an honour to serve nowadays, and we're just serving those people that we stood alongside, and all the new youngsters coming along as well. So yeah, thanks for what you're doing. I really appreciate it, and I definitely wish you well with your further events.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, thanks, Ian. Speak to you in a second.
Thank you.
So there you go. That's VOS, Veterans Outreach Support. It's a terrific charity, and it helps so many people in this area of the south. So if you want to get involved, you are in this area, or if you're out of the area and you just want to support us, then please do. So until next week, when I'll have another guest on the Everyday Conversations Regarding Mental Health, TTFN. Ta-ta for now.